صدام میاد.
Oh, I'm okay with that.
Is this good now?
Yep. Yeah, it should work. Yeah.
You hear me?
You know, once he gets the presentation, I just go out and I'm curious about that.
I was going to respond with you saying you weren't productive.
No, that has nothing to do.
Do you have my voice? Yeah. Okay.
You're not ready for the task.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Ali Reza Zandi. I'm the coordinator of, I'm going to keep it like that, coordinator of Fanbazar platform in Montreal Toy Society. First of all, I would like to welcome everybody here tonight. It's good to have you here. Before we dive into Mahdi's presentation, I would like to just take a moment and, briefly introduce Montreal Toy Society and also introduce the Fanbazar platform. Tawhid Society was founded in 2012. It was like in the winter of 2012 by a group of Iranian Muslim students from different universities in Montreal. It's basically a democratic non-for-profit organization, and the main focus of it when it was started back then was like to facilitate and assist the newcomers and to help them actually to integrate into Canadian society. Over the time it evolved and it branched out and into different directions. So far Tawhid has done like, it's safe to say, almost 150 various self and crowd-funded different public events, including academic and religious talks, workshops, charity and outreach projects, as well as recreational activities. So regarding the Fanbazar, I would like to just briefly introduce that. Maybe you find it interesting for yourself and maybe you would like to participate in this platform as well. This is basically a friendly environment and friendly platform that enables everybody who loves sharing his or her experience, his or her skills, or his or her expertise. And basically that's the whole idea about it. So far we have had like 5 different Fanbazars. First one was like the experience about using the Airbnb was like 2016. I was back then a member of executive board member in Tawhid, and actually I presented that workshop, that Fanbazar. Back then, there were so many questions in our community. What's Airbnb? Is it safe? Is it like, how does the hosting work? How does the guesting work? And stuff like that. So we tried to actually cover that. Second Fanbazar was all about outdoor fun. We had this, executive member of McGill Outdoors Club. And he was there for us and he shared his expertise on that. He talked about different events for summer, during the winter, to have fun and have some outdoors activity. Third one was really fun. It was whole Fanbazar on coffee and how to enjoy it, basically different types of coffee, different production methods of coffee, different brewing techniques of coffee. Even at the end, the presenter talked about different, interesting cafes in Montreal, which is really, Montreal is a famous city for its unique cafes. And for the fourth Fanbazar, stuff got a bit more serious. We talked about, the housing market. We had, some professionals, a panel of professionals and experts talking about different aspects of housing market and, how to invest on that. And the last one, which was held like a few months ago, it was about stock market the most, I mean, it was very well attended. Obviously, you know, money topic, very trendy and very hot. People like it, so we had like 70 people attending that session. And it was a very nice session. So as you can see, there's a variety of that. Today we're going to have the 6th Fanbazar, thanks to Mahdi. And if you find yourself interested in that, you can obviously just the thing. I'm going to go to the next one. I'm going to explain how does it work. If you are interested in having a Fanbazar, just send us an email. You can contact me. You can contact Mahdi. We just need a summary of the topic, about what exactly you're going to talk about, and we'll take it from there. We'll coordinate the rest of it, and we'll try to actually accommodate your guests. We'll try to, you know, come up with a date and location, and then we'll have a Fanbazar for you. So that will be it. Before I hand over the floor to Mahdi, just one thing. There's this little entrance fee to this event, $2. There's a box right in the front. If you want to, you know, participate, you can drop your fair share over there, and it's going to be waived for, you know, Tawheed Society members. So I think, yeah, I'm going to hand over the floor to Mahdi and give it up.
Hi everyone. Thank you for coming today. I also want to thank you guys for your patience because we did start a bit after 6. We did want to make sure that everyone is here, at least as many people that we can have who are interested. So today's talk is going to be about just my experiences, what I've been able to research and try to implement in my own daily life. It's not necessarily stuff that I've done research on and can tell you about the methodology and whatnot. It's a lot of my experience. I looked this up, I found out about this, I tried it, it worked for me or it didn't. Maybe it could work for you. I hope that you guys can leave this talk with some form of benefit towards your own daily schedules. Okay, so the main introduction to a topic like productivity is usually why it matters, why it's important to even care about productivity, why people tend to think about it so much, and it's mainly because of our society. Whether you're in academia or if you're in business, no matter where we are, it seems like whatever we're doing is not enough. We always have to be more, we have to do more, we have to be in 10 different places at the same time. And it feels like if we don't do that, then we're falling behind. If we don't do that, we're not qualified for positions and for different opportunities. And a big part of that is because of how our systems are structured, especially our academic systems and our work environments. And we have a lot of choices, a lot of options. Too many, some people say. And that's mainly because of advances in technology and because of our capitalistic society that really favors a lot of choices and a lot of freedom of choice. And at the same time, also, we don't really get any kind of guidance, any kind of help, formally at least, on how we could manage our options, how we could manage our schedules and kind of find what we should be doing and how we should be doing it. A bit about me and why I initially got a lot into this kind of topic of research for myself. At the same time that I have my university courses to kind of follow and attend the lectures, I also have been trying to do a lot of research with professors. Currently, I research at 2 labs. One of them is the Thai lab at McGill with Dr. Sweet, and another one is the Jerry Party lab at the Jewish Hospital. And the times are on and off, and it's very dependent on my time and their time in the schedule. But I'm also doing that at the same time as my involvement with Tawheed Society. I'm currently the chair of the executive board, and we have weekly meetings, and we organize different platforms like the Fanbazar that we have today that could maybe have an impact, hopefully a positive one, on our community. And beginning of this year, I've been also participating in the McGill's volleyball club. And that means I have weekly practice sessions, games, and also workout sessions that I have to either individually participate in or in groups. And so I've been trying to manage these multiple things at the same time. And I'm still sane. And I'm still alive. So I guess maybe there's something in it that you guys could benefit from. Now, initially, when I started to really go towards this kind of topic was around college. When I finished high school, there was a lot of things that I wanted to do, and I didn't know how to do them. I started to get a bit more involved in sports, playing soccer once a week. Initially, it was okay, but then I wanted to get involved in the community. And I realized that with my involvements, I was kind of falling behind on grades, and my grades were suffering. So then I tried to prioritize grades, and I realized I can't make it for my social events, and there's a big challenge to balance all of that together. And so I started thinking, why am I trying to do all this? And I realized that I have individuals that I've seen in my life that I admire because of certain qualities that they have. One of them was mainly that they were able to do so much, and it seemed kind of very easy and effortless to them. So I started thinking, what can I learn from these people? And one of the things that I realized was that they were using certain methods that we're going to be talking about today. And that was helping them to organize their time and their tasks and making sure that they were wasting the least amount of time and really having the most efficiency and productivity. And so that is why I started like this. Initially, when I started in the CJEP, I just made a kind of schedule on paper of Monday to Sunday, and I just wrote out all the classes that I had. And I usually started with my classes that you can see here. I start with class, and it was not very detailed, but it was very, very rigid and structured. Really, when this is done, start this. And that's kind of how I started out. And throughout the time that passed on in trial and error, I really got to different models. After that one, I eventually got to this model. This one, for example, is not on paper anymore. It's on Excel. And how this one is done is starts from 7 a.m., ends up at midnight, and I organize everything else into boxes again. But everything is so chunked up together. And then finally, after this, towards the end of my CJEP years, I had this final one on the right. And that one, as you can see, I tried to include some things that here it's not very clear that you can't see. For example, through trial and error, for example, I realized that I wasn't including the time it takes me to get from a place to another. Commuting was taking a lot of my time. And so, for example, I started to include commute by writing OMW as in on my way. And I tried to also color code more clearly in blue and orange, and each of those kind of gave me an idea. At the time, I was in the VCSA, the Vanier College Student Association, so you can see it in the dark orange there. And I had some office hours. I had to be at the office. I also had some volleyball. I was doing a lot of things at the same time. And I was making sure that I have kind of an idea of where I'm going with my schedule. And eventually, this is the kind of schedule that I have right now. So I have, you can see a very big difference and contrast in terms of the empty spaces, in terms of the color coding. I'm using Google Calendar. I'll be talking about the different applications and the different platforms on which you can use. Depends on you, whatever works best for you. But I'm still very far from what I would ideally want to have. I'm still not sitting every day thinking, oh, well, I'm the most productive person ever. I have a lot of days where I think, oh, it's not going that well. What can I improve? What can I fix? Why isn't it going well? And it's really that kind of question that we have to continuously ask ourselves to maybe find out what we can do. A good way that you guys could benefit a bit more through this talk is to end up with one of these questions at the end. So the main question you should start with asking yourself right now is the way I work sustainable? By sustainable, I mean, can you keep this up? Are you, for example, if you have exams and projects, are you cramming them? Are you doing them in the last minute? And do you think once you advance more in your academics or in your work situation, do you think that's going to still work? Are you still going to be able to give in a project, give in the paper with a result that works? If yes, is it always going to be so? At some point, you're going to have other duties that come up, other responsibilities. If you're going to be, if your living situation is going to change, life has a lot of ups and downs, so a lot of it is not up to you. But also we kind of have an idea of, for example, right now I'm living with a roommate, right now I'm living with my family, eventually I'll be out. Am I going to be able to do the same thing as I'm doing right now? If no, you can think, what can I change? And if you don't think that the way you work is necessarily sustainable or the best way that you could, we can think about why that is. Is it you, or is it the system that you're using? And if it's your system, then we can find what's wrong with your system. You can look at all the different theories and techniques that I mentioned and all the experiences and think, oh, well, for example, I can tweak this about the way I do my stuff. I can add this to it. Or if it's you, is it what you do, or is it how you're doing it? So sometimes we're going to do the right things in the wrong way, and sometimes we're going to do the wrong things and the wrong time in terms of priority. And so I hope that you guys can think about that. Some core principles, I believe, is that first of all, when you have a task that you want to work on, whether small or big, whether a project or a small paper or an essay, you have to really know what it is. You have to know the details that you're starting with in terms of the deadline if you have, the content details, the capabilities and limits that you have. And it's really this last one that really affects everything else, basically. And you usually try to plan according to that. We're going to take the example of a paper to submit, just so that I can come back to this example and put it into a context. If we say, for example, you have a paper to submit that's an essay format, you have about 20 minimum pages, and you have 10 references or so and that you have to include, and you have a deadline in 12 weeks. 12 weeks is about 3 months. It's about the end of a semester. So let's say it's a paper to submit at the end of your term or your semester. Now, there's actually studies that have been done that show that perceptions of workload can be improved by clearer communications of the expectations that a professor, a supervisor has of you. And that's very important in terms of when you want to start and you want to have that initial information, make sure that you know what that is, what it means, because that is going to affect the way you feel about the work that you have, to not feel overwhelmed or overloaded. When you want to start planning, you have to keep your plan realistic. You have to keep the tasks and subtasks specific. You have to estimate your capabilities and the workload that you have. And finally, you have to consider internal and external barriers. We're going to go into each one of these right now, and I'll give you guys a bit more detail about each of them. If you have questions, I suggest you wait until I'm done, so then we go through all of the questions in a row. Just have a good 30-minute session at the end of question and answer. But if it's a burning question and you can't wait, it's fine. You can ask it right now. A realistic plan is really the main thing that you need. Because if it's a realistic plan, it's going to take the barriers that you might have into account. It's going to distribute your load properly, not necessarily evenly. And it's going to include a schedule for right times. And finally, you're going to realize that sometimes you're going to have to do the work no matter what. So whether you're feeling that you can work, whether you're feeling like you're productive or not, or you have concentration, that's not going to necessarily affect it. Sometimes you have to do a minimum of work, because some work is better than no work. Now, in terms of the barriers that you have to take into account, you have to realize that, for example, if I want to start working on my paper, and I have references that I have to include, I have to do some research beforehand. And you realize for research, I have to open my browser. I have to go on Google, I have to search. And sometimes you have to notice that a barrier could be my laptop when it's connected to the internet. It's going to give me updates about my emails, for example. And that might be a distraction. Coming up, oh, let me just check that email. That could be a barrier. A very simple example that a lot of people give for barriers is if you want to go to the gym, go for a run the next morning, for example. In the morning when we want to get out, it takes time to find your clothes, find the shoes and all the gym stuff that you need. That's a barrier. At that step, a lot of people stop because they feel like it's too much. Even though the night before we feel like, oh, it's okay and we're going to go and work out. maybe the night before, for example, if you remember that that could be a barrier, the night before you put all that stuff on the side, so in the morning when you want to start that activity, that barrier isn't there anymore. In terms of distribution of load, it's a very simple concept. If sometimes you have a schedule and you have, for example, an hour and 30 minutes of work is scheduled for you, you want to do just 30 minutes, and then you have some reading to do, personal reading or some other reading that's not necessarily that important and urgent. If you see that in the first 30 minutes of your work you're very productive, you're in a zone that you can continue another 30 minutes and accomplish much more, then you can shift around your schedule. We're going to talk about that a bit later on, but that's what we mean. For example, in the mornings, if you feel like you can work more, in afternoons you can work less, then distribute your load according to that. Put more work to do in the morning, a bit less in the afternoon. You don't have to go about it distributing 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon. A lot of people, when they start, they try to really go about distributing it evenly, divided by 7 days, and then divided by morning and afternoon, and that's not necessarily how you work best. Finally, scheduling for the time. Just think about your other plans and the type of worker you are. Other plans, it's simple if you go towards your calendar and you have the events that you have. For example, I'm thinking about the next week. I'll be working on certain days, and so I can't study on those days. On some days I'll have class and then work and then another event, and maybe I can find 30 minutes to study in the middle of that. But am I really that type of worker to be able to work in 30 minutes? And you also have to consider your plans. So for example, if you're going from class and then you have an event afterwards, the 30 minutes in between might be just time for you to get to the event. It might not be time for you to sit down and study. So planning it might just make you feel like, oh, I couldn't get studying done in that day. And on some days, some work just won't be able to be done. In terms of keeping your subtasks and tasks specific, it's a question of objectives. You have long-term objectives and short-term objectives. Your short-term objectives are for when you're starting your work. When you're sitting down and you want to get into it, you have to think, do I want to reach a certain word count in the example of the paper? Do I want to finish a certain section, a subsection, a paragraph, an argument that I'm trying to make? And just having that objective in mind really organizes everything that you want to do. If it's a word count, you can aim for that. If it's a section or a subsection, you can go for that. And this is, the objective is actually very important because we're going to see that at some points we're going to have our circumstances that change. Something comes up, someone calls you, unexpected events happen. And when that happens, we have to be flexible and minimize damage if there is going to be damage. And what that means is, for example, if you're working on a section, for example, you're working on your introduction, and you realize that you won't have time to properly do all the sections of your paper, well, a discussion section is going to be much more important than your introduction. At that point, you can switch onto your discussion, spend less time on your introduction. So if you know kind of what you're working on, you can switch onto something consciously that has more weight. And your long-term objective is usually finishing, for example, the paper with a certain grade point average, or maybe finishing it with a certain quality that you're okay with. That might also change. If, again, for example, some unplanned circumstance happens, something happens, and you realize that I can't do an A, for example, for that paper, that's fine. At that point, we really have to think, what can I do about this situation and how can I make this still work? At that point, maybe going for a B+ is very possible. But if you keep on thinking about an A, the more you work at it, the more you realize that, oh, I'm not going to be able to make the A, and that's just going to affect your mood and your energy, and you're not going to be able to work efficiently. A really important point about the capabilities you have and the workload that you have is estimating them. And Daniel Kahneman is actually an economist, and he's won a Nobel Prize if I'm not wrong. And he's done a lot of research. And a very famous theory that he has is about the planning fallacy. He says that we tend to underestimate how long it takes us to complete different tasks. And that's because when we're planning, we're thinking about the future and what we rather have than our past experiences and what has happened. So for example, we think that, oh, I had to write a paper, the same kind of general format last semester. I eventually crammed it, and this happened and that happened, but this semester I'm going to plan it well and it's going to go fine. And that's not necessarily the case, because we have to think, why did that happen? Our past experiences indicate something to us. It's feedback that we can use in terms of data and information. If you were late on something, maybe it was because you thought that you can do something in 30 minutes, and once you started, you realized that there's no way you could do it in 30 minutes. That overwhelmed you so much, and you just set it aside and focused on something else. That can happen, for example. A good idea is therefore to think, how have I previously performed, and why, and what can I do about that? Another two theories that I'm going to show you a clip about is Parkinson's law and the segmentation effect. Parkinson's law is, it states that work fills up the space that is given to it. So for example, if you have a task and you have an hour to do it, it's going to take you an hour if you don't plan anything afterwards. And so it might be a good idea to estimate. Don't just think, oh, I'm just going to really overestimate it and put an hour for this that I think it could take me 30 minutes. Put 30 minutes, but leave some time, maybe up and down, plus or minus 5, 10, but not too much, because you're going to procrastinate. You're going to spend more time, and eventually it's going to fill up the space that is there. And the segmentation effect, I thought about how I could explain that to you guys, and I realized the clip really does a better job at explaining it. So I'll just play the clip at this point.
Have you ever had a project that could be done just right away?
Yeah, sorry about the audio.
Since it didn't need to be done until 3 months, it went on the to-do list and stayed there for weeks. Then, after a ton of mental procrastination, you start to work on it slowly throughout a couple of days. Once it's finished, you realize that you could have completed it within a few hours of intense concentration and achieved the same quality level. If this has ever happened to you, then I'm here to share a productivity tip that helps you to be more efficient with your time, work faster, and get more things done in less time. Parkinson's law states that a task will swell in importance the more time you allow to complete it. What this means is that the longer you give yourself to complete something, the bigger and the more difficult it's going to feel. Because what usually ends up happening is that you're going to procrastinate and do other less important things. And even if you're distracting yourself, that task is going to take up your mental energy, giving you pressure and stressing you out, since it's still at the back of your mind. So for example, if you have 24 hours to complete a task, the time pressure forces you to focus on execution, and you have no other choice but to work faster. So how do you use this law in your life? The action step we can take from Parkinson's law is to set shorter deadlines for yourself. Try setting time limits and deadlines for your tasks, meetings, and everything you want to complete. If you give yourself forever to do something, it is going to take you forever to do it. Focused, intense attention for a short period of time is often better than extended, lazy attention over a long period of time. When you do an activity, give yourself a set amount of time to finish it. Set a timer and push yourself to get it done during that time. If you're competitive, see it as a personal competition where you're trying to be better than you were yesterday. In order to give a task 100% of your undivided attention, saying no to distractions is a must. Remember that focus comes from eliminating distractions. Being aware of Parkinson's law can help you understand how your brain perceives time, so you can make the most out of your day by setting shorter time limits, which increases your focus and makes sure you're not wasting valuable time on the task. In this way, you can move on to the next task so you can keep on going and keep on growing. Thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you next time.
So I just realized the segmentation effect video is not this one. I thought this one included both. I think the segmentation effect, it's best for me to not guess because there's a lot of these theories that are there. I will try to eventually, we're going to be sharing this presentation file with all of you guys if you're interested, and I will make sure to include another slide with the segmentation effect video, but right now I'd rather not tell you something that is not the segmentation effect video theory, and you will have still a lot of information that you could use. So In terms of the capabilities that you have, another really important point is to realize that you have to compensate for the weaknesses that you have. And everyone has weaknesses. And you just have to think, is it a skill that I'm missing? If so, you try to find a tool. If, for example, in terms of writing a paper, you have good ideas, argumentation is good, but writing them out and grammars and the skill to write is not necessarily your strong point. What you can do is actually try to find online websites that do the editing. You can find someone who can help you with that work, but be conscious of that weakness that you might have. Another point is if it's a lack of knowledge, not necessarily tools. For example, you're good at writing, but not necessarily good with the ideas and the argumentation, then you can try to look it up, try to find arguments that have been made, ask people about their opinions. And I do realize that that's something that a lot of us do, and it's not something that's crazy as a new idea, but it's something that we eventually are forced to do. We don't consciously think about it beforehand. We eventually get to a point where, oh, well, I'm having too much difficulty, everything is going wrong, I'm going to try to find help with this, and I'm going to try to fix this. And so thinking about it beforehand can help you plan for it and compensate for it in a good time, so you don't feel extra pressure. And you have to also realize, like I said, if things don't go well, you can always compromise and control the priorities that you have. Again, going to the example of the sections of a paper in terms of importance, a discussion versus an introduction. If you have to focus on one, you should focus on the one that matters more, the discussion, for example. If you have to compromise on something, if you have to, for example, just write out a draft and then ask someone for help because you can't have time to edit it, that's fine. Try to find someone and go for that. And finally, you have to be able to ask for an extension and be okay with that. There's nothing wrong with having to ask a supervisor, a professor for a reasonable extension if something has happened that was out of your control. And a lot of people feel like that's a failure, but you have to realize that in life, not everything goes according to our plans. And myself, for example, at some point I had an assignment for a professor who gave us a lot of time, and she explained that no matter what, she will not give us any extension because she's given us a lot of time and it's a very doable project, assignment. And eventually, so I had a lot of things that came up, not in my control. And I was trying to somehow compromise on the aspects of it and just try to finish it with some sort of quality. And I realized that I can ask for an extension. So I just emailed the professor with complete honesty, explaining that I could submit it on time, but it would be one of the worst assignments that I've submitted. Things have happened out of my control. I'm trying to maximize my work, but any kind of extension could be helpful. And professors are human beings. Supervisors are people too. And she was very kind about it. She said, yes, that's not a problem at all. I thought she'd say an extra day or two. She told me I can submit it in a week. And I honestly replied that, oh, that's fine. A day or two is fine. And that professor eventually later on, when things again happened, I think one other time stuff happened again and I wanted some extension, she was very kind and understanding in terms of giving it. But you also have to be ready to hear no. And if you hear a no, that's fine. You just continue with the compromising of your work. Now, we could have internal or external barriers. Internal barriers are usually in terms of our mental capacity. Concentration is a really big one. Concentration is limited, and so a lot of people go for time boxing techniques to put their time into increments. This is actually a technique that a lot of famous people use. People like Elon Musk, Bill Gates. They're people who usually have a lot of different commitments at different locations and different projects. And the way that time boxing works is actually
this is a
like this.
This is a Pomodoro timer. This is the Pomodoro Technique. The Pomodoro Technique is a simple yet very effective way to improve your work and study habits. The basic requirement of this technique is to set the kitchen timer to 25 minutes. But this is just the beginning. In order to become a certified Pomodoro master, you you need to achieve the following 6 objectives. First, find out how much effort an activity requires you by monitoring how many Pomodoros you need in order to accomplish a specific task. Second, learn to protect your Pomodoro from the internal and external interruptions. Third, make accurate estimations of how many Pomodoros you need for a certain activity. Fourth, use your Pomodoro time not just to work on your task, but spend a few minutes for recap and the last ones for review. Fifth, set a timetable according to your to-dos, to your time, or even to the season. This is good for organising work and also for creating more free time. Sixth, once you have completed these objectives, find your own personal objective, such as being more efficient or improving the quality of your work. For example, a writer could track more accurately what he's doing during a Pomodoro, or a team may want to find out how good its cooperation is. But remember, you have to choose your own final objective. In order to achieve the best results, the objectives should be done incrementally. In other words, if you didn't complete an objective, don't move ahead to the next one. Continue trying to do better with the current objective until you feel that you've mastered it. For more in-depth tips, read the original book, record your progress, and become a certified Pomodoro master. PomodoroTechnique.com. I love my time. 2 hours and 40.
Now, the Pomodoro technique is a very good example of how you can put your time into increments of 25 minutes and maximize your focus and attention into a small amount of time and then give yourself a break. Now that clip talks a lot about the different things that I've mentioned already and some that I will eventually mention. A point about time boxing and how it helps is that when you put your time into boxes of 30 minutes, 1 hour of work or whatever project that you have that you're doing, it helps you to be flexible with it. If you have something that comes up right now and you can't put in 30 minutes, think what you can switch it with in the afternoon. Think what you can switch it with it the next day. And that gives your schedule a form of flexible rigidity, because you have a lot that's planned, but then again you could also interchange between and move them around. That is really based on the fact that your concentration is a limited thing. An example that the clip was talking about is putting away your distractions and kind of resisting them. A good example of that is when I set a timer, and I will be talking about applications that I use on my phone that can help you. Hopefully they do help me. One of the techniques that I use, for example, is when I'm working for 25 minutes on an assignment, a project, a paper, I have a paper next to me, and whatever thoughts that come to my mind, oh, I didn't reply to that email, oh, I have to follow up with this person about this, oh, there's this event, oh, that email I have to be sending. I just write them down on the paper just to put them out of my mind and continue on my work. And then when I have the break, I just do those tasks that I wrote down, I follow up with those, and then get back to my work. And that is a very helpful thing. We don't realize how much it can help to just put something out there and put it aside. And sometimes just putting your phone away is not really going to help. And we're going to get to that. Now, Teresa Glomb, she's given a very famous TED Talk, and I've actually given the link to the video as a reference in my last slide. But she explains about organizing your work for a downhill start. And the concept is you're going to park your car on a downslope so that when you want to start driving, all you have to do is lift your foot from the brake. And that is a very good analogy relating to the example I give for going towards the barriers that you have and eliminating them. But this also looks at maximizing what can help you begin your work. So it's not just about what can prevent you from starting, but also what can help you to start. A good example is clearing off the desk that you have before you start your work. A lot of people, when there's a lot of books and papers on their desk and it's a lot of clutter, it's hard for them to focus. Maybe taking that out is not necessarily going to fix every problem that you have, but it's going to make it easier for you to start your work. Another example that I use a lot, and it helps a lot, is writing the priorities you have for the next day. Because the next day you might know what you have to do, but having a reminder of the main things that you have to be following up with, it gives you a kind of head start, as in, I know my plan and that's where I'm going towards.
This is...
And so another example is, for example, I have my workout sessions that are in increments of an hour and 30 minutes. This kind of time boxing allows me that, to be able to move this into another space that I have in the afternoon or another day if I have a meeting that comes up or if I have work that gets scheduled. And this kind of time boxing is very easy to do on an application like Google Calendar, whether it's on your phone or on a browser or just on your laptop, which is why I use this so much, because it's very easy to also put it into your phone quickly and move them around. You can also take an event that you have, copy paste it, and kind of move that around with different days that you want it to be followed. And in that sense, time boxing allows you to do a lot of things, but also remain flexible. Which is why, for example, a lot of times when my friends ask me to meet up or I have something that comes up, I rarely end up saying no, because I know that I can make it. I just have to look at my schedule and find out when that is. You also have physical energy that you have to manage, not just the mental energy and the mental focus that you have to manage. Sleeping earlier often helps a lot of people, and we know that sleeping earlier is going to help, but we don't really go for it. A lot of these suggestions require some sort of commitment initially, but on the long run they show benefits that keep people into doing them and continuing with that. Sleeping earlier, for example, helps you to wake up earlier as well. And for a lot of people in the morning, they might be able to focus more, or they might be able to have an environment that's more quiet and calm to be able to get to their work. And in that sense, it might just work out much better for you. A lot of us also get really hooked up on the concept of being a morning person or a night person. Don't let those kind of labels that you put on yourself maybe define you. If you want to do work in the morning and you think that's a time that could be quiet and you could focus well, you can try to make it happen. You can just plan for it, sleep earlier, wake up in the morning, and see how you can do that work. A lot of people just refuse to even give it a try because they say, oh, I'm not a morning person and whatnot. Another example is of an activity that you could do to manage your physical energy is working out. You could do aerobic exercise, which would be cardiovascular, running, biking. A lot of people do this, but not enough. You should be doing that about 3 times a week. It could be just 20 minutes, 30 minute sessions, anything to really get your blood pumping and give you some sweat, and that's really going to be beneficial. And also anaerobic exercise in terms of strength training, so going to the gym and lifting some weights. These 2 points are actually very important because they're not just about managing the energy that you have, but they also are preventative of a lot of diseases that people might have. Anaerobic exercise, for example, strength training, shows to reduce a lot of risk of osteoporosis. They both show a lot of promise in terms of reducing risk of cancers. And so I strongly recommend you guys just think, how can I make it happen? And not just think, oh, do I want to do it? If you know something's beneficial, think, how can I make it happen for myself? And they're going to help you for sure. A lot of people think that, oh, I have so much to do. If I go to work out, I'll just be tired and I won't be able to do work. But it's actually been shown that when you do a lot of workouts and a lot of exercise, it maintains your body into a better, it puts your body into a better situation in terms of the focus that you want to have, the energy you have. You're going to be able to walk more, run more, do more things, and be less tired. Eating is also very important. Your diets should be small and more frequent with snacks. That's generally what research points towards. For a lot of people, this might be a bit difficult because our meals tend to be very large and very far apart. But smaller portions are also easier to take with you if you're going out. And also snacking can help you as you're doing your work. A lot of times we're sitting down, getting through our work, and we don't realize, but we're very hungry, our stomach's growling, and eventually we just wait, get up to go for a big meal, and that wastes a lot of time. Having a snack next to you might help you continue your work for another hour or two. You also have to, again, going back to the example of sitting down and getting work and feeling tired or whatever, you have to notice the signs that you have, signs of restlessness, signs of hunger. A lot of times people sit down and they start their work and they get into it and they don't realize they're under pressure, and then at some point they realize, oh, I have to go to the washroom in the next 2 seconds or else it's too late. So try to be a bit more self-aware, and that is going to just help you a lot if you notice these signs and just go ahead with it. You also should be taking regular breaks. I know people who sit down and just for an hour non-stop, 2 hours, 3 hours, get through their work, but that's not sustainable. An example of something that's not sustainable is not taking breaks, because if you take more breaks, you're going to be able to maintain your concentration for a longer time, and you're going to be able to keep on sitting, for example, for a longer amount of time. If between each of your Pomodoros, for example, 25 minutes, you get up, go and drink some water and come back, you're going to realize that you're going to be able to do 6, 7 Pomodoros that are about like 25, 30 minutes, as opposed to just going for 3 hours and then feeling that you just can't sit anymore and just putting everything aside. Your mental energy is also very, very important. Interruptions are a big part of today's society. Our interruptions are usually phone-based. Our applications, Facebook, and in the Iranian community, it's a lot of Telegram. Instagram is very popular. And you have to realize that you can customize these interruptions and notifications. You can go into the app itself, but you can also use applications that limit the notifications that you get. And I'll go towards explaining some of that when I get to the applications. But you should notice that if you're sitting down to work and you keep on getting emails or your phone keeps on buzzing, that is taking away your concentration. It is taking away your focus. And it's going to take you a lot more effort to get back into your work, even if you just realize that something's there and then want to put it aside, even if you don't give it a look. A lot of times also we look at it and just get absorbed into something else. Respect yourself and the time that you have there. You can also answer the messages that you have at set times. So for example, when I said you can put a paper next to you and write down the things that you remember, a lot of times I put my phone away and just on the breaks I take them out. And in the worst situation, that means I'll be answering someone 25 minutes late. But usually that's fine. If someone has something urgent, well, I was in the middle of some work, sorry, now I'm available for you. A lot of people also, for example, for emails, they set times that they want to answer their emails only once or twice a day, and it's set times around 11, maybe 10 a.m., a time that works best for them. But they go through all that, and then they have another in the afternoon, a time where they check all their emails, all their messages, answer everything, and then they get back to their work. Identifying next day's priorities, I mentioned, can help a lot with concentration. I personally, for example, sit down almost every night and think, what are the 3 main tasks that I have to do the next day? And oftentimes, a really good point about this is when you put those 3 tasks, you know that you have to just focus on those, and those are the most important ones. And it's often easy to accomplish those 3 because it's not a lot, 3, and it's the most important thing. So what else are you going to do? And once you're done with those 3, if you have time, you can do more. But if it's just those 3, at the end of the day, you're going to feel like you were very successful, very productive in that day. And that feeling already fuels a lot more positive energy into your mind. You should also be reflecting on the day that you had that passed. A good point of reflection is the feedback that you can get from yourself and from how the day went. But a good point about it is gratitude and pride. We should be allowing ourselves to be grateful for things that happened to us during the day. And we should be proud of some moments that we have or other people have. And that can help us also to sit down and write three things that we are grateful for that happened that day. 3 things that we're proud of. That really helps a lot with self-image and self-esteem, and belief in our capabilities. You know, if you go through a week or two and every night you're reminding yourself of the 3 really important things that you're proud that you did that day, at the end of that week or two, you're going to feel like you're a very capable person. And we often are very capable people. Finally, meditation is a big one. A lot of people do this. You can do this in different ways. There's a lot of methods. The simplest one is really just focusing on your breathing and just zoning out of what you have going on and giving your mind a kind of refresher, if you might say. It helps a lot for self-awareness, because when you're able to be more in control of your mind, you're able to notice things, notice emotions and feelings that are going on. If you sit down and it's just you and your mind, it's very easy to realize that I have a certain feeling. What am I feeling? Am I sad? Why? Is it because something happened? Is it because I wasn't able to accomplish a task, for example? Do I have to be sad about it? Not necessarily. I'll just get it done tomorrow. But that's going to help you identify a lot of things that consciously you might not really realize, but subconsciously it's affecting you. Now, discipline and self-discipline is also a very, very important aspect. Research has actually shown that self-discipline outdoes IQ in terms of academic performance in adolescence. But a lot of people would think, oh no, the smarter someone is and the more intelligent someone is, whatever that means, they're able to do more. But actually, the studies that have been done, and this has been proved a few times after the study came out, final GPA, for example, in this graph, as a function of ranked quintiles of IQ and self-discipline, it shows that when people are going to be more self-disciplined, their grades are going to be ending up at a higher grade point average than in terms of comparing it to just IQ. When we have that self-discipline, we're able to do more. But a big part of it is believing it. A lot of people just think, oh, I'm not smart, I'm not intelligent, I'm not that bright, so I'm not going to be able to do this. This kind of research, this kind of reminder helps us realize that if we push ourselves a bit more and respect ourselves and the time that we have and our capabilities, we can outperform a lot of people who just don't do much, don't plan much, and just really go for it based on what they know. Some possible external barriers, getting out of the internal ones, are the schedule, the environment, the circumstances you have, and overplanning. Now, the schedule that you have, I did talk briefly about being aware of what you have in terms of the events coming up and being able to move your events around. But it's very important for you to also realize that, for example, if I am someone who does exercise, I'm on a certain team or I have a workout, and there's days that I'll have practice, or there's days that I'll have events, and you look at that day and you realize that there's just too many things that I'm doing. I'm running around, and maybe at the end of the day I'll have an hour, 2 hours to do my work, but is that really going to be a time that I can work? Sometimes realizing your schedule is not the optimal one in that day helps you to realize that, okay, well, on that day, for example, I'll go sleep earlier, and the next day I'll wake up much earlier and get a lot more done. That is a question of just knowing your schedule. A lot of people think I have a sports session, and after that they sit down, they're physically drained, mentally drained, and they just try to push, and there's nothing that's happening. And then they just feel bad that they're not able to get work done. But realistically thinking, you're not supposed to be able to do 10 million things in the same day. We have a limited amount of energy, limited amount of concentration. So once you get to that limit, just rest up for the next day and get more done the next day. Your environment is also very important. A lot of people tend to think that, oh, I work best at a cafe or at a library or at home. But I found that for me, for example, it's not a constant thing. Sometimes I'm more productive at a cafe, sometimes at home, sometimes at a library. Sometimes it depends on the task. If I, for example, have to do the paper example that we gave, if I have to do some research for references, I find that at a cafe, I'm able to, in 25 minutes, come up with maybe 35 references ready with different quotations, and everything's perfect. But if I go to a library and I try to do that, I won't be able to do nearly half as much. So the nature of the work you do depends also, is going to affect the environment in which you're going to be more comfortable doing it. But also sometimes we feel a certain way, and that also affects it. If you're feeling a bit restless and tired, and maybe going home is going to help you just wind down and get into your zone of focus, you should go for that and not tell yourself, no, I should go to a library because I work best at a library. There's nothing that's fixed and set for anyone. You should experiment also. Find out when and where and for what tasks you work best in different locations. Unexpected circumstances are going to always happen. You always have something that could happen. You should try to think about them. You should try to expect the unexpected in a way. And that is not very easy to do, but it gives you some form of preparedness. For example, I know that on the weekends, my mother, for example, is more likely to ask me for help to go shopping for the house. I know that on the weekdays, I'm more likely to be called up to go to the lab and maybe put in some hours and do some work. If I know that on certain days there's some things that might happen, well then I won't fill up those times with some other task just in case something does come up and I have to shift too much around and it just becomes undoable. So in that sense, thinking, oh, well, for example, for Monday, Tuesday, the next week, today is Sunday, we think the next week I have different tasks that I have to do. I have different events, different meetings. Am I going to be able to do this? Is nothing going to come up? Is someone mentioned about an event? Oh, might they need my help for that? You know, a lot of things that we can think, oh, maybe. And at that point, you could call people, make sure about things, and empty up your schedule if necessary. Over-planning is a very big one because personally, the first example that I gave, that was, do I have it here? I don't have the example. But the one on paper, the first schedule that I made, and even the second and the third one that I made, that was over-planning. I went through that and I realized that this is too much. Not leaving empty space, not time boxing and just filling up the space that you have. Think about the Parkinsons law. Just saying studying for 3 hours, studying for 5 hours. But maybe the task on that day would take an hour, maybe 30 minutes. Over-planning oftentimes makes us feel that we haven't accomplished much, we're not as productive as we want to be. There's also a lot of other negative points that I'll go over, but we have to be aware of over-planning. Planning generally helps. I truly believe that planning has helped me do anything that I've done up until now. And I've done a lot of things that I wouldn't have seen myself do maybe a year ago, maybe a few months ago. But I just thought, well, how can I make this happen? And I planned for it, and it did happen. And I feel planning is very positive, but we shouldn't do too much of it. Now, in terms of over-planning, Elizabeth Grace Saunders actually has in Harvard Business Review a very good article, and she summarizes 4 main points that I have for you today, and I have experienced almost every one of these. Her first point is plans are roadmaps. You might need to take a detour. So if you plan to do certain events in a certain organized way, in a certain order, in a certain manner, and you have a goal. For example, you want to do these so that you can finish up your paper on time, just as a general example. You have to realize that that's a roadmap. If you don't follow it exactly, and yet you still get to your objective, that's fine. You have to realize that if you don't fully follow your plans and your schedule, you will still get to your plan, to your objectives. And sometimes taking a detour is going to help us. Sometimes, like I said, if you see you're in a zone and you're working well, extending your time a bit more is fine. It's going to help you a bit more. Oh, but it's not in my schedule, but I have to follow my schedule. Don't think like that. Be ready to change up your details here and there if it's going to help you. You should also not measure your success by how faithful you were to your schedule. This was a big one for me at the beginning. I felt like even though I was trying to keep my plan realistic and my schedule realistic, I was trying to almost every week look back at my schedule. Was I able to make it? Did I estimate this time properly? Did I do this well? Did I do that well? I realized that no matter what I did, it was hard to follow my schedule to even 90% of it. And that was really affecting my sense of, oh, was I successful that day? Was I successful that week? And that kind of feeling really had a negative impact on me. you are not going to be more successful or less successful if you follow more or less your plan or your schedule. Plan and schedules are there to help you. If you need to discard them, put them aside, and do something else to get you to your goals, then that's fine. You also have no perfect plan. A lot of times we use a lot of techniques, spend a lot of time planning. Don't spend too much time. Spend just enough. A lot of it is doing and less planning. Your plan is never going to be perfect. And this is really important for anyone who's a perfectionist, anyone who tries to do the best that they can no matter what. Sometimes what you have is already the best it could be. Just set it aside and start doing. And finally, try to expect the unexpected when you plan. And that is a point that I already talked about a lot in terms of thinking what could happen on certain days and why not, and taking that into account. Now, to plan and to make a schedule, you can use a lot of different tools. You can use a notebook format or a calendar format. I've used every single one of these. I've used the notebook on paper. That was the first one I used. I've used Microsoft Word. It helps a lot.